Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show, the latest episode of Got China. The trade war between the United States and the whole world is in full swing right now, and that's why we're sitting here to talk everything about it, especially what China thinks about it. I'm really looking forward to going over this subject with both of you. Zhang, who's a familiar face with us on the show. Welcome back, JJ.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be back.
And today we have our special guest is Professor Zhao Hai. He is the Director of International Politics at the National Institute for Global Strategy at the Chinese Academy of Social Science. Would you like to say hi to our audience?
First, thank you for having me, and hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
All right, and so without further ado, let's dive right in. Professor Zhao, we've been through this before. In 2018, I was in DC. I was working in DC, so I saw the first round of trade war. And now Trump is again in the White House and he's launching the trade war once again. But we see a lot of differences between this time and the last time. Could you explain to us from your point of view, what is different from last time?
Well, there's an old saying, first time is tragedy and second time is just a farce.
Okay.
So the first time, I think Trump is actually more organized and more theoretical approach towards how to impose tariff and how to deal with China as a strategic competitor. And also behind him back then, there was this whole establishment moving step by step. For instance, 2017, Trump is moving forward with the tax cut that is satisfying Wall Street's requirement. And then by 2018, he's starting this tariff war, trade war with China specifically. And that's also pushed by the military-industrial complex and also American business that wanted to pressure China to open the door further. And this time around is totally different because now you have the MAGA that is in total control and just bulldozing every agenda and making the tariff against the world a top priority. Right. So instead of moving forward and finishing the tax cut bill and also having deregulation, all the reforms of government completed, and then start the tariff war, Trump picked a very early time and started the whole thing and disregarding all the other interest groups and only to satisfy his base.
Right. Under Trump 1.0, 2017 was a rather stable period between China and the United States. Trump was focusing on domestic affairs and only started the trade war in 2018. And it started with a very limited scope and then expanded gradually over time, right? But this time, it was only weeks after he stepped into the White House. And we're seeing the tariff rates just exploding from 25%, 54%, or I think even the White House lost count at one point, how much tariff should be charged to Chinese goods. And I think one observation I had compared with last time was the last time around, Washington had some specific demands, such as IP protection. They accused China of IP theft. And also they wanted more market access for American companies. But this time, I don't recall Washington, putting out a list of demands for China. I mean, it's just like tariffs after rounds of tariff. And what is it all about? What does Washington want from China this time?
Again, first time is probably well thought of. I think Leitheider thought this through and have a plan. Of course, later on, the plan was also disrupted by Trump himself.
Right.
This time is old Trump. He is a reality TV show character or personality, and he just wanted to attract all the attention to himself without thinking through exactly what is the plan on the table and how to finish the deal. So he just imposing randomly. As we see, the whole calculation is very random. And then trying to entice all the other parties come to the table and start negotiating with him.
Even as
without
pigeons.
asking. Yeah, even as the penguins, right?
Yeah.
So the only thing that people can expect is that he's out of the deal.
Part of the deal.
Right? The deal is actually, if you read the book and thought about his previous career, he's basically saying, you propose a price to me, and then I can having a counter price to you, and then we start negotiating. So he's not going to reveal exactly what he wants.
Okay.
And that's the difficulty for the other parties because they needed to actually self-escalating, offering more and more to test where is the bottom of Mr. Trump.
So that is his strategy of the deal,
Yeah.
of making deals. And another point of difference that I might make standing here in Beijing is I think from Beijing's point of view, it's much more prepared this time around than in 2018. I mean, 2018, I think Beijing was more or less a little surprised by the trade war. It didn't see it coming, but this time I think everything is well prepared. Everything was thought of. So nothing that Trump came up was very much unexpected. Would you agree with that?
I think it's a little unexpected when the tariff is going to like 145. I think Beijing prepared for 60 because that's what Trump declared during his campaign. Last time, if you remember, he declared 45, right? And then he goes to like 25.
But to be fair, I mean, 60% and 145% doesn't really make that much of a difference.
Yeah.
Because 60% in reality already
it's going to cut out, yeah. But so people think, well, if you go to that level, you're childish.
Okay.
And that's why I think later on China says, okay, you play your own game.
All
We're
right,
not going to follow.
With that, I think that let's enter the next segment, which is how Beijing views this round of trade war. And I want to go to you, JJ. You've been observing all these official statements coming out of Chinese government, various ministries like the Foreign Ministry or the MOFCOM, the Commerce Ministry. What are they saying? How are they viewing this?
So first of all, I agree with you that China is prepared because as we just discussed, it's not the first time that the United States administration add tariffs to Chinese goods, right? In 2020, like in the past 8 years, actually, China and the United States are engaged in a trade conflict. So China is prepared. And if you look at the statements given by the Chinese government, for instance, the Chinese Foreign Ministry, it mentioned that if the United States is going to exert like a tariff pressure to China, it's actually hurt Chinese people's legit rights and also the rights of the other countries. So Chinese government is not going to sit idly just to wait to see everything happens. We know that China already give countermeasures against these tariffs. And on the other side, actually, you can also see that the Commerce Department mentioned that China and United States, actually these two countries' interest in trade benefit each other. So if the United States wants to talk, the door is open, but the talk should be based on mutual respect, should be a fair manner. On the other side, if the United States want to fight this war, China is not to back down. I remember that I see a tweet by Mao Ning, a spokesperson of Chinese Foreign Ministry, who used a video of Chairman Mao. I think that was during the Korean War that the Chinese leader mentioned that China will never yield to such suppression. So China will decide how long the war will continue. It will be decided by the other side. China will just fight against these things.
Right, and I want to make 2 points to you. Right, exactly. I think one of the evidence that I saw that indicates that China is much more prepared this time around is whenever the U.S. rolls out a tariffs or whatever policy, the Chinese side always has something ready up its sleeves. I mean, it's pulled out like overnight, right? In response to that the U.S. policy. That means that there has been a whole strategy that's been devised and designed to respond to the U.S. side. The other interesting point that I heard you mention is China really stresses this principle of mutual respect. If the two countries want to engage in a discussion or whatever communication, it must be based on mutual respect. And it's fair to say what's coming out of the White House, what's coming out of Washington is far less than respectable, right? I mean, here in Beijing, we don't feel respect from the United States, right? I mean, so JJ, and I want to ask about the media. The Chinese media obviously has been reporting on this trade war nonstop and from many angles too. Could you summarize for us what Chinese media are saying and what are they concerned about?
I can give you 2 examples of China's mainstream media. For instance, Xinhua News Agency published an article about the importance of China keep opening up to the overseas market.
Okay.
And People's Daily also has an article mentioning about the importance of managing China's own affairs well. I think that also, you can see that reflects China's strategy of not being led by some other countries, wrong steps, because China has many things to do to solve for its own problems, and China has its own strategy. So I think that emphasizes China's stance. Also, you can see the media also has a pretty clear stance about this tariff.
I think this time around, compared to the state media, I think the social media is much more lively and take it much better than the last time. And it shows Chinese people are very humorous, sense of optimism, and also, having fun.
Right, the memes.
Making all the memes, AI generated,
right.
short videos and all kinds of talkings, trying to follow what's going on in the United States. One thing is, it's very interesting. Probably you watch this when
which one?
Like the U.S. side always calling all reshoring, making America great again in terms of manufacturing, asking others to invest in manufacturing. But then I think there's this video showing all this production line works reshoring to the United States and asking the superheroes, driving the screws and making shoes.
Well, I didn't see that one. I need to check that out. But these memes, I saw new ones coming out every day. I think I saw one with similar to that one. I think prominent U.S. politicians working the sewing machine
sewing machine. No, fat person working on the sewing machine. But anyway, it exposes the ridiculous sense of how this whole scheme was, right? And how tariffs actually not going to do the work for Trump to realize his goal, sort of importing all these jobs back to the United States.
Well, it's interesting that you should mention social media. According to your observation, what is the general gist of Chinese web users in the face of trade war? Are they nervous? Are they worrisome, or are they confident? How are they feeling?
Well, I think there are people worried, but most people are much more optimistic this time around because, as you know, China's exposure to U.S. market has been greatly reduced since last time. And also, just like you said, our export market is much more diversified, and particularly go to the Belt and Road countries and, increased export to Southeast Asia and other places. And also this time around, I think in terms of technology, in terms of manufacturing capacity, China is also on the rise. So people are much more, DeepSeek and all
innovations,
the other.
and the robot. I saw the robot marathon. Did you guys watch that? It's super fun.
And the drones.
And the drones, right.
So this time, I think the people are much more confident that Trump's game is not going to work.
Okay, so a well-founded confidence, I might say. And what about the academia, Professor Zhao? Within your circles, the Chinese experts, what are they saying? What are they thinking? What are they analyzing?
Well, as you know, China's academic world has dived into this problem and had a lot of excellent research. At the same time, across the ocean, there are also excellent research coming out of the United States. So you can see that scholars are echoing each other, criticizing the logic behind Trump's tariff, and also examining the industrial sectors and how over the years the supply chain has been built in China that is so efficient that cannot move easily to other places. That's one thing. And then I think from strategic perspective, there are other international relations scholars also talking about how this will change, for instance, global order.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people concerned about the changing of global order, the future of a multilateral world. Right. Remember in February, there's this, Munich security conference when Vance is just, throwing fireballs at the audience. And I think after that, there's a lot of scholarly discussion about where this is heading. And from China's perspective, of course, we're thinking about if we're going into this changing international order, what China's role is. There's a lot of discussion in that part, and how China should play a leading role in terms of establishing a global south sort of structure that will be more just, equalized, and also more focused on development instead of, compared to the last globalization that is only focused on the free flow of capital.
Right.
So there's, I think, a very vibrant academic discussion of the current situation on many disciplines.
If you can hold that thought, I really want to circle back to it later in the show, as we discuss what's the next step or next phase of this trade war, and what is the next phase for the global order at large. So, but for you yourself, I mean, you are an expert in this. What is your personal interest? What are you watching in this whole trade war?
So I'm looking at this from two perspectives. One is U.S.-China relations, of course. The other is U.S. domestic politics.
Okay.
So the second part, I think, is much more interesting because at this point, I mean, since 2016, when Trump started to run for U.S. president, and how the U.S. system has evolved, and how internally the U.S. elites are divided and fighting with each other, right? And how American people, American democracy can deal with the impact of Trump presidency. So there's a lot of things that are going on within the United States. I think right now people also are very interested in this Doge thing, with a dog head, Elon Musk, showing up U.S. Federal government, and how they actually, on the one side, calling for the reduction of U.S. debt and U.S. Government expenditure, but on the other hand, in reality, not much has been done, even though there's all chaos. Right. So there's a lot of interesting things happening in the U.S. right now, and compare this period to historical period like 1930s and 40s, or even further 1890s, or even 1830s. There's a lot of interesting comparison going on, and that will inspire people to think more about longer historical period, not just within our lifetime, but 100 years, 200 years.
Well, that's what Chinese are good at. I mean, we look at things, in millennia. We look at things by the long run, right? We take the historic view. That's what we're trying to do. We're good at. But I think it's really interesting that you should raise this aspect of domestic politics, because I heard the conversations I heard around me. There are two schools of thought, right? One is Trump is launching this trade war to get China, or to get somebody, or another foreign country. You can fill in the blank here. The other is he's doing this because of there's domestic demand. The reasons come within the U.S. borders. Which one would you side with?
It's hard to say, because Trump is hard. It's unpredictable, and I think he's
maybe we should invite him to our Go China show.
Exactly.
We definitely should.
To get China, to go China.
Okay.
I think this time it's not about get to China. Last time maybe, because China is such a big focus. This time he's really angry at the world, right? And he's also angry domestically as his political enemy. He thought in the past year his political enemy put him in prison and and prosecute him. And also the world is eating American lunch, or taking advantage of Americans. Right. So I think his starting point is that everybody owes his money.
Okay.
Some money at least. China owes him the most.
Okay.
And then how his whole plan is to use tariff and get everybody to pay him back, not just the United States, but him personally.
And which I think economists all over the world has agreed is not going to happen. That's not how you get your money, even if it's owed to you, right? So all of that, I think, is a overview of how China sees this whole farce, in your words, that's going on right now, right? But I think more importantly than how China views it is what China is doing to respond to it. JJ, you've mentioned that the editorial from People's Daily, it stresses that China needs to do its own things well, right? I mean, that's how you fortify yourself as a defense against the U.S. trade war. And I want to break down some of the approaches that China is undertaking in response. I think the first, and if you don't agree, that's fine, is that China is really meeting these U.S. policies eye to eye. China's not shying away. China is not showing weakness. China is showing every bit of confidence that we will go with you all the way if that's how you want to do it. We've got all day to do this. In Chinese, it's called 奉陪到底, I believe.
I want to add to that, is that really China has no other option, because that's how you deal with a bully, right? Because China and many other countries see Trump as a bully, but then how you negotiate with the bully? If you step back, he's going to, put more requirements, more sort of pressure on you. And then even if you reach agreement with the bully will just tear that apart and then, ask for more. So I think really there's no other option but to stand up against the bully and say, stop here, otherwise we're going to go total destruction on both sides. I think that's the only strategy, only optimal strategy on the Chinese side.
What about you, JJ? Would you like to add something? I mean, why do you think Beijing is taking this approach?
Well, China has always been an advocate of economic globalization and multilateralism. So, of course, the tariffs has hurt Chinese people's security, development rights, but also China's countermeasures is also based on the logic that the tariffs is going to hurt the interests of the global community. So as a big economy as China, it has to defend this rule-based WTO economic globalization order. So I think it is actually a just cause that has been supported by many countries.
So it's looking out for itself as well for the global trade order at large. And I think that's one really in general assessment of China's approach. And echoing your previous point, you say that one of the strategies employed by Trump is it asks other countries, the other parties, to come up with an offer. But China's not doing that.
Yeah.
What is the thinking behind that?
Well, it's interesting coming back to JJ, he's talking about rules-based international order. Remember, during the Biden administration,
right,
Biden always say, America is a supporter of rules-based international order, and somehow China is the one that is trying to destroy it. Now everybody sees, the world sees that it's the US actually violating and trying to destroy the rules-based most important international order. And if you destroy that order, of course, the world will go back to might is right,
yes,
kind of the world, right? So I think China is defending that. So that's why China is not giving it an inch and promised to fight till the end with the bully, right? If you, makes sense if on a mutually respectable manner, discuss, real issues with China and negotiate with China and try to rebalance anything, economic imbalance between US and China or the United States with the world, that's fine. But now the US is not doing that without any rationality, without any justifiable cause. So that's why I think China is taking this approach. Again, at this point, if really the US wanted to come to China, they need to call us and say the previous tariff is irrational. They will unilaterally lower, giving up that tariff, and then we can start talking. Otherwise, I think nobody in their right mind would say, okay, under this pressure, I'm just going to kneel down and, as Trump says, kiss his ass, right? And then do whatever he asks. That's not going to bode well for the future of the international order because he's not going to stop there. And the US, if feel like bilaterally they have the power to overcome any other small country, what the world will become.
Right.
Right.
And I think that is not China's only approach. That's not China's only card. I think.
Yeah, I remember you posted a newsletter. I think introducing about building a united front against this protectionism, right?
Right. I think that's what I saw. I think China is proactively reaching out to other countries to find common ground and to enhance ties, especially trade relationship, so that there can be more unified response to the United States.
Not to the United States, to Trump administration.
To the Trump administration.
Yeah, because within the United States, there's very strong resistance already.
Well, I agree, totally agree. So, because everyone is a stakeholder in this, right? There's no country, even the Penguin Islands are a stakeholder in this. No one is safe from this trade war. And actually, the Chinese President Xi Jinping has just concluded his Southeast Asian tour. He visited Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia. I think trade was very high on his agenda. Just yesterday, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi had a call with the UK Foreign Secretary. And from the readout, you see trade was factored in heavily in the discussion. And the readout also signaled that there will be bilateral trade talks between China and the UK, down the road. It's being prepared. So I think those are all very useful and effective approach to respond to the Trump administration?
Because we talk about there are, factions within the Trump administration. There are, of course, MAGA or faction or other, tech faction, Wall Street faction, but then there's also a very much establishment neocon faction within the Trump administration. They always wanted to steer the tariff war only against China and trying to reach deal with others first, and then turn other countries against China. So I think China's call with Great Britain, with other countries, President Xi's tour in Southeast Asia, and also recent diplomatic efforts between China, Japan, Korea, are all sort of preparing for this scenario where the U.S. is trying to pressure other countries to, and add a condition for other countries to lock their door with China in order to having favors coming from the United States. Right. That is actually a pretty damaging strategy from the United States. It's a very Cold War mentality. Mm-hmm. If that's realized, other countries will be hurt by both sides because, for example, if Vietnam agrees to the U.S. terms, then China's outflow of capital, of production capacity to Vietnam will be stopped. And even if Vietnam has lower tariff from the United States, it has less investment and trade flow with China. Right. Same thing if the U.S. pressure Vietnam to choose sides, it's very hard. So I think the world needs to come together and resist this kind of Cold War mentality, this kind of China hawks agenda, so that the world will not be caught in between the two superpowers and trying to figure out what to do.
I think I agree with that. And one thing, because I read all those readouts, and I think what I saw was there is really a lot of consensus between China and these other countries. There's really a lot of common interest in going to respond to the United States in a unified manner, that people are standing together in doing this. And it will be for everybody's greater good so that people stand up more to this irrational trade behavior. Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, on the other side, I think not just the Chinese government's response, swift response, like the countermeasures, but also China is also continue to emphasize it's going to opening up towards overseas markets, such as Chinese government I think just released a document about China is going to opening up or going to have 155 pilot tasks about opening up its service sectors to overseas market. There are examples, for instance, the foreign doctors can open up their clinic in China, and international travel agencies can also offer outbound travel services to Chinese customers. So they are all like steps by steps that China. I think that the importance that is the signal that China is going to follow the trend of the time, which is the economic globalization, to continue to connect itself with the other countries.
And I think in more practical terms is that it allows more opportunities for other countries to profit or benefit from China's development, because China is a large market by itself, right? So there's tons of business opportunities here.
Absolutely. If you look at the world, there are three major consumption centers. One is North America, one is European Union, and the other one is actually China. And China's market is actually growing bigger and bigger. However, if you look at the monetary structure, because the US dollar is a reserve currency, it's sort of overvalued. It's a dominant currency in the world. It's overvalued. Therefore, its purchasing power is bigger than it should be. And China's RMB is actually undervalued, even though China is a major manufacturing hub. So in the future, I think the rebalance is that China should increase its consumption of services, right? And increasing education, healthcare, and other services, professional services. And that will not only rebalance China's domestic economy, but also attract more investment, more goods and services coming into China, making China is an even bigger consumption center. So that will reduce the impact of reducing the consumption on the US side, and the global economy will, as a result, more rebalanced.
I see. And obviously, all of the things that we've discussed are approaches taken by the central government, Beijing. But I think what is less reported or lesser understood by especially the the world is there's actually a lot going on under the surface, namely what local governments are doing right now to help local businesses cope with this trade war. And I think, JJ, you've did some studies on this, and you put out a newsletter and for several case studies. Could you explain them to us?
I think the local governments also have a very swift response to the U.S. tariffs challenges. I think many top Chinese provinces, I think the
top trading provinces,
top trading provinces, I think they are holding, like the government are holding lots of symposium and doing lots of researches. First of all, to understand the needs of the exporters who are influenced by the U.S. tariffs. I think there are mainly two approaches. One is to diversify the market access of these exporters. The other is to better connecting the exports to the domestic markets. I think locally there are some, for instance, Shenzhen has established a platform to better connect the exports products to the domestic market. And even I think some private companies such as JD.com, they also pledged to purchase, I think, 200 billion yuan, which is about 27 billion US dollars worth of goods of exporters. So that's also a way to, I think, alleviate the pressures of the US additional tariffs.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I think that pretty well sums up the various approaches that China has taken, from the central government aspect to the local governments. I mean, how it is responding to the trade war initiated by the Trump administration. And I think we're all very much concerned with what's going to happen next. And this is where I really want to have your expertise in this. How do you expect this trade war to proceed, to evolve?
Well, let's look at the reality. The reality is that without Chinese goods floating from China to the United States, the US has now an inventory on average about 3 months. So between 2 to 5 months, they need to resupply. And right now, basically because of the high tariff, the flow is shut down. I think according to the most recent number, there's like 64% drop in terms of shipping from China to West Coast of the United States. And that's unsustainable. And that's why last night, I think previously, Trump has to talk to Walmart and other retailers, and also the auto parts producers complained, and other small businesses filed lawsuit against Trump administration already. I think hospitals also said without resupply, they will shut down I think in 2 to 3 weeks. So that means over the next couple of months, you will see, without resolving this issue, you will see a gradual suffocation of American markets, less and less goods supply and higher price. So that's the pressure that is building up. And already in advance, financial markets reflecting this reality. You can see the rising US bond yields and also collapsing US market, right? Almost 1,000 points a day. So I think the Trump administration is now very much in a crisis mode. They need to figure out a way out. They need to find themselves a step down. But then because they are so, in the beginning, not thinking this through, they're now in a mess that they themselves cannot get out of.
Do you think Trump is climbing down with his most recent remark that he's saying, oh, this high tariff with China is not sustainable. We need to lower it, not to zero, but to a level that China is satisfied with? How do you take that signal?
Well, I think words is not enough now. Because he has done so much damage, he needs to act on top of his salting words to show his sincerity of reaching out to China and start talking. And again, back to JJ's point that China's foreign ministry said, talk, the door is open, fight till the end. So I think Chinese side from the very beginning said our door is always open for negotiation. It's just that you have to pose a gesture, I think, to tell the Chinese side that you really want to talk, not to play the game and not to back down in the middle of the negotiation.
And let's not kid ourselves. The global trade order doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? So whatever happens in the trade order reflects in the global order in their general, global geopolitical order. And so how is that going to play out? I mean, this really reminds me of the movie Day After Tomorrow. I mean, when the dust settles, when we enter a new tomorrow, what landscape are we going to see?
Well, first of all, I think we will see a reduced role of America in the world. And I think there's a certain time period of post-Cold War world is ending. And at this point, I think most countries realize that in the future, we're entering into a unpredictable, unstable stage of global transition. But at the end of the tunnel is China's proposed equal and orderly transition towards multi-polar world. And the multilateral organization will play a major role, and the global south will have a bigger voice. And that's the world we're heading. However, in the process, from a very much US monopoly to a multipolar world where China, European Union, Russia, India, everybody is having a seat at the table, there's going to be a very complicated and difficult process. And unfortunately, in that process, we have people like Trump that is really making this transition even more difficult.
I see. And JJ, will you be paying attention to as we go through this tunnel?
I think on the one hand, I'm definitely interested to know that what will be the next step of the Chinese government. I think, well, at the current stage, we know that China is going to manage its own affairs well. I think that includes the reforms. We know that since July last year, China is actually in a new round of very important and comprehensive reforms. And actually, China is very good at turning the challenges into opportunities. So I remember Tian Xuan, an expert from the Renmin University, he also mentioned that actually it's also a great opportunity for China to innovate its products and to diversify its market access. So, well, I'm keen to say what will be the next step will be more like reform measures released by the Chinese government. And I'm also interested to know that other countries' response. So, well, I think at the end of the day, you have to make a deal with each other. And I really hope that actually my personal view is that maybe China and United States can get a good deal. That will be benefit for each country. So we will see, I think, yeah.
Well, my personal two biggest takeaways from what you just said is, one, China pledges to be the biggest certainty or the biggest stability in this whole era of instability. I think that's a very good thing. And second is, it ultimately is down to who can best adapt to the new reality or new norm to better develop itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And also, I think add to that, I think China has already innovated in terms of providing the three global initiatives, right? Development, security, and civilization. And I think in the future, there are probably more initiatives, but only the three that's been...
And of course, the BRI.
The BRI, yeah, as a practical foundation for that. I think that in the future, more and more countries are ascribed to these ideas. And in the future, I think China's proposal will be respected and followed by more and more countries. And the thing is, I think other than the traditional like old outdated G7 mode, we're now enter into a BRICS mode, right? We have Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we have all kinds of global South organization that will take on more responsibility and also campaign in the future for more free and open and equal trade. So again, I think at this time, countries need to stand up against the bully and also trying to promote a better idea for the future of the world. Otherwise, it's all doom and gloomy for the future era. But actually, there's shining and good days in the future ahead for the people in the world.
I think there is an old Chinese saying, 得道多助，失道寡助. A just cause gains great support, while unjust one gets little. And I think the just cause in this context, in the economic globalization context, is that China is actually trying to make the economic cake bigger for the global community, while the additional tariffs added by the current U.S. government just make the cake smaller. So, well, for the next step, I think if China continue to champion, as Professor Zhao just mentioned, I think it will win support of many, many other countries.
That's very well said. So any last thought like you would like to share?
I want to go back to the beginning. As I said, Trump's gamble is either going to end with a big farce or a big disaster for him and for the world and for the United States. And I think in all of this, China has played it right, acting as a ballast for this global ship that is trying to go through this uncharted water. So in the future, I think after all this, dust falls down, we will find that China has championed the right way forward, and other countries, like you said, will see that's a just cause and will follow.
I see. JJ?
Yeah, I mean, as the Chinese leader said that the Chinese economy is not a small pond, but a big ocean. And actually Chinese economy has experienced lots of different types of storms, and it has been very resilient. So I think because, there are many opportunities like in the future, so I think China will stay composed. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. That's all the time we have. And thank you for joining us on this talk over the U.S. tariffs against the world. We'll see you again next time.